I was 13. And all of the Baptist pastors in Danville met monthly, regularly. And early in 1941, they met and discussed the possibility of us having a church near Everett. They felt that was necessary and that another Baptist church was needed in this area. So each Baptist pastor went back to his church, and the churches agreed to the idea. And it was in April of 1941 that we had the first meeting at Everett to discuss the possibility of a church in this area somewhere. And I came with my mother to that meeting and attended the other meetings that led up to forming West Main Baptist Church. I was 13 years old. And we were members of Second Baptist Church, which at that time was located where WBTM is today. It was a small group. I really don't know how many. And people came from all of the Baptist churches in Danville. There was a large delegation from Second Baptist Church because we had many members at Second who lived in this area where the church is today. And we met in April, and we met again in May. And they took a straw poll of who would be interested in becoming a part of a new church in May, and several people said they would. And then it got really heated up. And there was a local businessman who stood up in the meeting in May and looked around at the crowd, and he said, "I don't see enough people here that can finance starting a new church in this area." He lived in this area. But he didn't quench the spirit because there were many who thought it was a need. And so in May, a chairman was appointed for the group that was meeting and interested in starting another church. And his name was Henry Hall. And he and his wife were active members of Second Church. And he appointed a building committee to look for a space for a church. And chairman of that was Stanley Hoden. And he lived in this area. And so in July, when we met again, Stanley had found a house on the corner of West Main and Lockett, where two elderly women lived, and they were willing to sell the house. And so the proposition was laid before the group, and the group approved Stanley to proceed with purchasing the house. It was located in the center of a very deep lot on the corner of West Main and Lockett. And in September, we were able to purchase the house for $7,250. And today, West Main owns all of the land between Lockett and Mountain View that we have purchased houses to build the beautiful buildings we have today. It was a small, diverse group. Some businessmen, some people who were employed in administration of Dan River cotton mills, many people who worked in Dan River mills, some teachers, just local people. No one that you would call really wealthy at that time that could provide great financial help. But with the purchase of the house, we decided that there would have to be some renovations. And so the first meeting, the charter meeting, was on a Sunday in October of 1941. And we decided that anyone who attended that worship service, and at that time we had morning and evening services. So if you didn't come Sunday morning, you could come Sunday evening and be a charter member. And we ended up with 137 charter members. It was interesting. The women and men who became members worked on that old house. They tore down the wall between the dining room and living room and made it into a sanctuary. At the end of the first floor on that side of the house was a bathroom, and they removed all of the tub and the sink and the commode, and that became the choir loft for the church. And on the other side of the hall, there was a large ladies' classroom and a men's. And then behind that was a small room that was our nursery, and the kitchen was there, and there was a bath there. Upstairs, there were classrooms and another bath, and that's where the younger people. And later, as time went on, we took part of the front porch and made it into a church office. Mr. Hall was a strong leader, and O.A. Collins was elected chairman of the pulpit committee, and he secured Reverend A.G. Carter to become our first pastor. Mr. Carter lived up on Howland Circle, so he was familiar with this area. And he was an older man and had been at Second Church for a long time and felt it was time for him to move on. So he accepted the challenge to pastor this new church at $2,700 a year salary. This was 41. And you have to remember this was World War II, that when we were fooling with this house and later trying to build the sanctuary. Mr. Collins and Stanley was in charge of the finance committee, and all of those people contributed greatly. But it was just, there were very few young children involved, and some older people, and maybe some younger couples. But we had Sunday school, a full Sunday school from nursery up. Later we developed a nursery where we could look after babies too. And that's why I got my start. Arlene McDowell's mother was in charge of the younger children that could walk, and she needed some young help to keep up with those children. So at 13, I became Ms. McDowell's assistant, and I helped with the children until I guess I finished high school. And then I worked with older children for the 2 years I was at Everett, and Everett was just a junior college then. And when I went away to West Hampton, I was gone 2 years. And later, I married Lee, and he was in service for 2 years. So there were about 4 years there that I was not involved directly with the church. But I have taught a class ever since I was 13. So about 70-some years, when I turned 91, I decided it was time to give up teaching my class. Mr. Carter didn't stay but 3 years as pastor. On Easter Sunday, I'll never forget that service. I left the church crying. He read his letter of resignation to accept a call to Bedford Baptist Church. And his thinking was that at his age, he was not up to a building program for a new church. And that was in April of 1944. At that time in Danville, the pastor of First Baptist Church, Dr. L.D. Johnson, was very helpful to our church to give us the name of one of his seminary friends who had finished seminary with him, who he thought would be an excellent minister. And so we called him and he came to preach a sermon. His name was Howard William Lee. And Mr. Carter left in April of 1944, and Dr. Lee came in August of 1944 and stayed with West Main for 27 years. He retired in 1971 to go to Everett as assistant to the president. But during those 27 years, the church grew. We had over 250 members. We had a music program, a full Sunday school program, and during Dr. Lee's years as pastor, the sanctuary was completed, then the educational building plus the music and nursery wing were completed. There were 5 houses on this block from Lockett Street to Mountain View. We tore down one house to build the sanctuary, another house to build the educational wing. Then we were able to buy a 3rd house and use that for extra room until it was demolished. And then we were left with the corner house on Mountain View and a house right next to the music wing. And we finally were able to purchase both of those. The old house was in the center of the corner lot. And when we decided to build the sanctuary, we had a building program. And you could buy certificates in different values and pay for them. And that helped us to raise money to build this sanctuary. And so when the decision was made in 1948, the first load of dirt was removed to move the White House to the very back of the lot, with the back of the White House facing the Forest Hill School playground. And the sanctuary was built in the front. It was not completed until 1949 due to the war. We couldn't get steel, we couldn't get things that were ordered for the building. But in January of 49, the Masonic Lodge laid the cornerstone for the sanctuary. And it was in October of 1949 that the first service in the sanctuary was held. And the first wedding was Nell Collins Thompson, who had been a faithful member of this church, who was a graduate of the training school at the seminary, and married a minister, and they were married in this sanctuary. We had an electric organ in the sanctuary, a Wurlitzer, and it was many years later that the pipe organ was installed. But we did have Mary Louise Jones was the first organist for the church, and she was with the church for several years. And we've had a great music program through the years.
Can you tell me a little bit about Dr. Lee and just what he was like?
Dr. Lee was young, he had a vision. And his first sermon, he said that he and Margaret, his wife, had come to West Main to fulfill that vision of a church in this area of the city. And he immediately started making plans for what the sanctuary would look like. And the Gothic structure was his desire, that he wanted the church to have a high ceiling so that when you came in, you would look up. And he was active. He was a wonderful minister. He had great training. He worked well with people. And in 1956, in a deacons meeting, he said to the deacons, West Main must make a decision. We will seat any black visitor who comes. That did not go well with that chief usher. And so he resigned from being the chief usher, Mr. Slayton. But that did not kill the spirit of the desire that we would be open to all people and they would be seated. We had ushers that stood right up and said, I will seat any black person. This is significant because it was in 1963 that Danville had the big civil rights disturbance, and people were abused and were jailed. But this church had made that decision, and there were black people seated and accepted. And today I'm proud to say that we have many members who are not white Americans. And I'm grateful to see them active in the church. Even one has been chairman of the deacons. It did not kill the spirit that it was accepted by our deacons and the congregation accepted it. And Dr. Lee had a way. He had a wonderful spirit of communication with his congregation. And he was respected, and they knew that he would lead us in the right way. And it really helped. And I think, although that was a time when things may have been tested other places, he saw a need for this church to take a stand, and we did. And it's never reverted. It's stayed with us, and I'm grateful for that. I think there are challenges. I think we are living in a very chaotic time. People are seeking answers. People are seeking calmness, freedom from anxiety. And we may have to be aware more of those things now than we were. But I look back to 1941. Of course, I was just a child. But I think of adults in the fall of 1941 thinking about starting a new church. You've got a world war going on. We lost, my brother-in-law was killed by a German sniper in Belgium. in 1945, and I know about the problems of death with military people, but I think about adults thinking, well, we can build a church, we can do that. And I do remember those anxious days when we were selling those certificates in different denominations to raise money to help with the sanctuary. You wondered about things, but there have always been hard times. And sometimes it's in those difficult times that we are forced to look upward and try to ask for guidance to how to deal with it. West Main has many new members that I do not know, and they're young people. I see children. Every Sunday I see all these children listening to your mother, and I think how blessed they are. West Main has always had a lot of children. And as Bruce reminded us when he came, they are your nursery. They are your foundation you build. And I think if we can keep this group that we've got now, this family of faith, strong and convinced that we have something that is worth fighting for, we will grow.